this class is called DNA Success Stories. And there's a couple of us that are going to be speaking because we each have some different stories to share with you that maybe will give you insight into researching your own families using DNA. My name is Jennifer Petrino. I am a professional genealogist that specializes in Italian and Sicilian research. And so I'm going to be sharing with you a story today. This is one of my clients that I worked on. I do have his permission to share his information. And the reason I picked this one to share is it's kind of a lesson in the lies that our families tell and how you can use DNA to kind of uncover the real truth. So what we're going to be working on today is, who is Anthony's father? So I'm going to start with the story that my client, whose name is Michael, told me when we first started researching. He said that his grandfather, Anthony, was born the 22nd of July, 1905 at Ellis Island when his mother arrived on the ship from Italy. His mother's name was Giuseppe Vaccaro. At the time of his birth, Anthony was given the name of his stepfather, Santo Giordano. So he became Anthony Giordano. And based on a 1910 marriage license we found for Santo Giordano and Giuseppe Vaccaro, at that time she said she was a widow and that her first husband's name was Ferrara. So we assumed, oh, he must have died. She met Santo and had this baby, and he took his stepfather's name. It was all lies. Okay, so the fact is, Giuseppe actually arrived in 1901. She was single, and she came with her brother on the ship. I could not find her in the 1905 New York State Census. And for those of you that don't know, some states have census records in the off years from the federal census. Nor could I find her on any ship in 1905. So I believe she was here, but I don't know where she was in 1905. Anthony's birth and or baptism could not be found anywhere in New York City either. And believe me, we tried. Santo and Giuseppe actually married in 1913 in New York City. At that time, she said she had never even been married before. So in 1910, she filled out this marriage license with Santo in Ohio, where they were living, said that she had been married, was a widow, that her first husband's name was Ferrara. Then they never actually got married. And 3 years later in New York, they're getting married, and now she's, never been married before. Don't you love it, right? Then when Santo and Giuseppe became naturalized citizens, they didn't even mention Anthony at all, as if he didn't exist. So for those of you that don't frequently use naturalization records, on a petition for naturalization, they would list all of their children, even if they were already adults. Anthony was not listed for either of them as their child. So this left us going, what the heck? Like, who is Anthony's father? Who's Anthony's mother, for that matter? So the first thing I asked Michael to do was to take an ancestry DNA test for obvious reasons. We're going to try to figure this out. Again, Anthony is Michael's grandfather, so we're working back several generations here. So the next thing we needed to do was research Giuseppe Vaccaro's family very extensively, for two reasons. Number one, we want to look, when the DNA results come in, we want to make sure that he does link by DNA to her family, that she really is his mother. Then we want to research Santo Giordano's family, because maybe he was really the father and we just don't know it. And then we also need to research Anthony's wife's family and Michael's mother's family. And by doing that, when we go through the DNA results, we'll be able to eliminate them, if you will, from our match list, because we're going to know that those matches are not Anthony's father's side. They belong to these other groups. Y'all with me so far? Okay, good. One thing I want to mention real quick about when your DNA results come. A lot of people do their DNA testing right after Thanksgiving and Christmas because they've been given that as a gift, or Thanksgiving makes everybody feel all mushy about family, so they do it. So a lot of times, roughly February-ish, March, you may see your DNA results populate with a whole bunch of new matches. Just a little tip there for when when you're trying to figure out mysteries. Okay, so when the results come in, we're going to try to group the shared matches together by color using either the leads method or the color tools provided by Ancestry, MyHeritage, etc. Were any of you in the previous DNA sessions, maybe they talked about the leads method a little bit? Yes, no? Okay. Well, here's a graphic for the leads method. Again, this is a way to quickly identify groups of people who may have common ancestors between them. In this example, which is not related to this, but I found this great example online, in the first column A is all of the person's DNA matches. Column B is the amount of centimorgans that they share with that person. And then the colors are what we're going to talk about here. So what the leads method says is you take the person that you have the most DNA with, in this case Dorothy, assign her a color of blue. Then click shared matches and give the color blue to anybody else on that list that matches to Dorothy. After you've done that, you go back to the next highest person, which is Sam in this case. We're going to give him the color yellow, click his shared matches, and go down the list and mark everybody. And the same thing with the green and the red. By doing this, you are able to group those DNA matches together that they should be the ones that are, like everybody in the blue should have common ancestors with each other. Everyone in the yellow has common ancestors with each other. So if you kind of think about it this way, the blue might be everybody on my mother's side. The yellow might be everybody on my father's side. The green might be everybody on my maternal grandmother's side. It's helping you identify the family groups, okay? So when I did this, I'm getting ahead of myself. Then you're going to, my next thing didn't come. There it goes. You're going to examine each of those color groups to try to figure out which side, in my case, of Michael's family that they are related to. So I'm going to look through all of those people that were marked blue, let's say, and look at their trees and look for pieces of Giuseppe Vaccaro's family or pieces of his mother's family so I can figure out which part each color group goes to. And I just want to mention, we want to always focus on what you do see, but also what you don't see. What I mean by that is this. Here's the color-coded matches for Michael. You see a green, a blue, and a red group. Not a single match in any of his DNA results matched to anyone in Santo Giordano's family. So I knew then he is definitely not the child of Santo Giordano. So that's what I mean by pay attention to what you're not seeing as well as what you are seeing, okay? I will make a little note about Santo Giordano. He happened to be from my own family's ancestral town, and I was related to Santo Giordano. Weird little quirk. Okay, so everybody in the green group, when I started going through the trees and everything that people had, everybody in the green group turned out to be related to Giuseppe Vaccaro's side of the family. Everybody in the blue, that tells me, yay, she really is his mother, okay? The blue group was Michael's mother's family. But the red group didn't have any apparent connection to any of the known family groups for Michael. Not his mother's side, Giuseppe's side, etc. That means that's our target group because we've got this unknown person up here above Anthony. That's where that DNA is going to fit. Making sense so far? Okay, good. Okay, this is an example of Michael's match list, and I've kind of blacked out people's surnames for privacy, but I just wanted to show you how you have your list over here. It's telling you the amount of centimorgans and the degree of relationship that people share. And then on the right, do you see how everybody has a blue dot? It's because I gave them all blue dots. Those are all the people that he matches in this target group. We are going to examine all of those people's trees and try to figure out who the common ancestors are between them. So if you look at the very bottom, Providenza has a nice big tree built. So I can use her big extensive tree and try to figure out, do any of these other people on the list fit into her tree? The ones that have very small trees, sometimes you have to research their family for them. If they have enough information that you can use to build the tree for them and try to work your way back until you find where they link in with the other people, that's what you got to do. If they don't have any trees or they don't have enough information, look for anybody, if their name is an unusual name, search for them on the internet. Look for an obituary where their name is mentioned, and then you can see the rest of their family. I am very much a Facebook stalker. If you look on the fourth person down, I've kind of covered most of their name, but it's a hyphenated name. You search that kind of name on Facebook, you can find that person fairly easily. And unfortunately, people don't know how to use privacy settings. You can look through their friend list, the comments below their page. It might say, hey, Aunt so-and-so. And you go, oh, okay, now I know how that person's related. You have to build the trees pretty much any way you can to try to find who the common ancestor is. So when I did that for Michael, I discovered that if you see the arrows where they're pointing down, these 4 people on my red group all linked back to Matteo Nuccio and Grazia Lomonte. Those were the common ancestors between those 4 people. In reality, there was a whole bunch more that linked back to these common ancestors, but for simplicity of the presentation, that's the 4 that I chose to show you. So Matteo and Grazia had at least 4 children. A descendant from each of them has done DNA and links to Michael. But we still have these 3 other people in the red group that I didn't know how they were related. I couldn't find enough information that made sense to link them to Matteo and Grazia. But I got to looking at that K. Nugent down there, and I thought to myself, Nugent sounds awful kind of similar to Nuccio. Maybe some kind of name change happened there. And it turns out I was right. It turns out that K. Nugent is a descendant of a man named Theodore George Nugent, which I just have to add a side note, was fun to research because that's Ted Nugent. So try searching that online and see what you get. But it turned out Theodore's real name was Matteo Nuccio, and he was a son of Tommaso by a different marriage. So now I know that Matteo Nuccio and Grazia Lomonte had a son, Tommaso, who was married at least twice, and descendants of each of those wives, of his relationship with each of those wives, is a DNA connection to my client. Okay, so I know I'm on the right track here. I think Tommaso has something to do with this, but I still don't know. I still have that Barry and the Micah that I don't know how they fit in. So let's talk about them for a little bit. Barry and Micah are an uncle and nephew, so I knew they were related to each other. They descend from a man named Abraham, born in 1912 in New York City, which is where the Nuccio family was also. Their entire documented tree on Ancestry was made up of Jewish ancestors from Eastern Europe. However, the ethnicity for Barry, because on your Ancestry DNA results, you can click the little button for your shared match that says ethnicity, and it will tell you. His was 73% Jewish and 27% Italian. Huh, that's kind of weird. So I emailed Micah through the Ancestry message service and asked him about it, and he said, no, my ethnicity was what I expected. It was all Jewish. And I was like, well, you know, kind of, it wasn't. You have like 27% Italian. So I don't know if they discussed in the previous classes how your DNA gets, as it goes down the family line, how much DNA you share from each generation. So your DNA, you get 50% of your DNA from your mother, 50% from your father. Your grandparent level, you're getting 25% from each of your 4 grandparents. Well, this is interesting. Barry has roughly 25% Italian DNA. The other 73% is Jewish. Y'all following me here, right? Okay. That means that Barry has a grandfather that is Italian. That is not reflected in his documented tree.
How did you know it was a grandfather as opposed to...
I didn't. My bad. A grandparent. Thank you for that question. It's because I know up here which way it was. Okay. So what I found, though, is even I had seen that, it was kind of a dead end because Barry and Micah's documented tree isn't going to tell me anything. Their whole ancestry shows Jewish. So I went back to Tommaso Nuccio because I thought, something's weird here. This guy has to somehow, how does he fit? How do Barry and Micah, how are they fitting in this family? So I start looking more at Tommaso Nuccio, and I found some very interesting things. This is the 1910 census. Right there, you see Thomas Nuccio. Right here, you see this guy named Arnold N. Do you remember that little chart I showed a minute ago? Barry is the guy whose name says private. His father is Abraham. His grandfather is Arnold N. Huh, isn't that fascinating? Barry's grandfather's family lives next door in the same tenement building to Tommaso Nuccio. Fascinating. Okay, so then the next thing I found was Tommaso's petition for naturalization. You know, interesting stuff, his address, so I know it's the right person. It says one of his wives' names there, Mary Rowe, the son Matteo, who later became Ted Nugent. At the bottom of the page, look who signed as a witness on Tommaso's naturalization document here. It's that Arnold N. The next door neighbor. Yeah. Okay. So now, here's what I believe is the tree. We have Matteo and Grazia at the top. There's Tommaso. He marries Maria Rowe in 1890. They have the son Matteo, who becomes Ted Nugent, who has a descendant, Kay Nugent, that's linked to my client through DNA. While he's still married to Mary, or Maria, he has a relationship of some sort with Vincenza Bellone. They have a daughter, Rosaria, who links through DNA to Nicole, who was on one of the previous slides. Then he happens to be living next door to Mary W., who is the wife of Arnold N. And Mary has a son, Abraham, born in 1914, whose descendants are linked to my client through DNA. So, yeah. So I sent this very fun email to Mackay through that ancestry service and said, you know, I found something kind of weird. Let me just show you. This person, Tommaso Nuccio, lived next door to your family. And that was all I said, like, wanted to see what he was going to say back. And he just wrote back and said, wow, must have been some hanky-panky going on. Okay, so now I've established, one thing I want to mention, the amount of DNA shared between my client and the people in this branch of the tree of Matteo and Grazia, they shared more DNA with the Kay Nugent, Nicole G, Barry, and Micah than they did with anybody in the other branches of Matteo and Grazia's descendants. So that was a clue for me that it's got to be somewhere in this part. Something here is where Anthony's father is. So the next thing I turn to is a tool called, or a website called DNA Painter. DNA Painter they have a what are the odds function that allows you to enter a family tree with all of the relevant information, and you put in, if you see all the boxes that are kind of yellow, have a centimorgan count. So all the way over on the left is Matteo. Then the second column you have Tommaso and the other his three siblings. And then I basically just built the tree in there, entering the centimorgans for each of my client's DNA matches. Again, I'm going to point out, look at everybody in Tommaso's branch. They have more DNA shared with my client than everybody in these other branches, okay? After you enter all of that information in there, you click, what is it called? Create hypotheses or something. I forget what the button says. But DNA Painter, what it does is it looks at that tree you just built and all of the centimorgans shared between everybody, and it guesses where your person belongs in that tree. And so it told me, see this strongest right here? This is where it believes Michael fits in the tree, which is perfect with what I was suspecting, that Tommaso had a relationship of some sort with Giuseppe Vaccaro, which produced Anthony Giordano, who is half siblings with these other children of Tommaso. Then here's Michael's father, and here is Michael. So I was able to figure out that Tommaso Nuccio is Anthony Giordano's biological father. Did everybody follow that? It seems really easy that I just said all of that in 10 minutes, but it was hours of research. So what I want you to take away from my little portion of this class is, remember that the family stories that you get and the documents that you're finding are not always 100% accurate. Remember, Giuseppe's first husband was listed on that marriage license, but he didn't actually exist. And then And then what else did I want to tell y'all here? Then we want, oh, what happened? My things didn't come up. Oh, it just had the whole list. I'm sorry. The Leeds method of color coding and the DNA Painter are very, very helpful tools. If you have not used them and you have DNA and you're trying to solve this mystery piece, you want to use those. It can really, really help. You want to research all parts of the family so that you can eliminate them from your results. This is especially when you have a mystery person. But even still, if you have people in your DNA matches that you don't know how they fit into your family, look and see who they match to so that you can and you may need to research all of those extensive families to figure out how they're related. Documented family trees versus biological family trees. So Barry and Micah still have all of that Jewish ancestry showing in their tree. That is their documented family tree. Because Barry's father's birth certificate surely says that his father is Arnold, not Tommaso. So just keep in mind that sometimes you find those trees online. They may not be the biological tree, but they're just by documents tree. Use all available resources. When I was trying to figure out how Barry and Micah were connected, I was using those census records and looking at everything around them. That's how I noticed, hey, wait a minute, this guy lives next door to them. If I hadn't noticed that that Arnold N was a witness on the naturalization record, I'm not sure that I would have caught all of that other stuff, because sometimes you're so focused on the person you're looking for, you're not looking at everybody around them, but that's really important. And then that goes to details, details, details. Read every detail on your documents, because you never know what kind of clue might be hiding in there that can help you figure out not only DNA mysteries, but any mysteries, really. Okay. Does anybody have any questions, or was that just too much for you all? Because to me, it took me a long time to put that together in a way that was easy to follow. Anybody questions?
No, but we like to hear you.
It was a great story, right? All those untruths. Who's going to be next? Okay.
But you and I need to talk. I need to get help.
Okay.
We're over here discussing.
Here's this. And then there's the plug right here.
Hello, how is everybody? Good, good, good. How many of you all are beginning doing research with DNA? how many of y'all are old hands at this? Been doing it for a while, got tangled up all in the DNA? How many of y'all are looking for new solutions? Yeah, let's talk about that. So I'm looking at pushing the edge of your DNA success stories. And in particular, this looks very familiar to you. I was looking forward to bringing that lock of hair that is in the Bible. How many of y'all have that lock of hair in your Bible somewhere? You've forgotten who it belongs to. There's a story behind that hair, all of this different things. Well, DNA technology is pushing that type of sample for everyday people. And imagine, you don't even have to imagine anymore, it's here. We actually can take that hair out of the Bible and use it as a key for our research. It's coming. The scientists have pushed it. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Meranda Bradley. My background is in molecular biology dealing with DNA. And I knew this technology, I've been talking about it for years, is coming. It's here. We do it all the time with ancient DNA. But ancient DNA it takes a lot of effort and a lot of money. It is not reasonable to actually take that lock of hair and do what you need to do with it for the everyday person. So we do it for the ancient bones and things like that. But someone has just recently taken this DNA in 2021, and here's a lock of hair, thank you, that Marilee brought. And they've actually taken that lock of hair and they've actually done it and developed a new method. And guess who the person is? His name is Sitting Bull. How many are familiar with him? Sitting Bull. He's famous for winning that battle with Little Bighorn in 1876 and defeating George Custer. And when they defeated him, he actually was on the run for several years and ended up going across to Canada. And in Canada, they brought him back into the United States, and he ended up going on to the Indian reservations. And that Indian reservation in South Dakota is actually where he ended up dying. And when he died, the army physician who actually came to look at the body had been sitting out for 4 days. He actually took a piece of hair from the scalp and kept it, as well as his leggings. And that lock of hair ended up at the Smithsonian. Now let me tell you, that lock of hair is a key to a mystery for this young man in 2021. This article just came out in November 2021, and it was a key to helping figure out an age-old family story. He had heard, his name is Ernest, he had heard that he was the grandson, the great-grandson of Sitting Bull, but was told not to talk about it. How many of you all ran into that story where you're told, don't talk about it, we don't talk about it? Anybody watched Encanto, the Disney movie? We don't talk about Bruno? That's the problem the genealogists run into, is those stories are so ingrained to not talk about them. They're mysteries, they're rumors. And he was ingrained not to talk about it. And so, but he ended up proving the story. And that's what I want to share with you about, is he was told not to talk about it. He was Bruno. He knew he was, the family had the story, but he actually was approached by scientists at the University of Cambridge who found out that this lock of hair of Sitting Bull was there. And they knew his story. He had been, by this time, let me tell you a little bit about Ernest. That's Sitting Bull's great-grandson. He originally came out as a young man who was having a lot of trouble. He was an alcoholic. He joined the military, was a vet, and he was told not to talk about his grandfather, right, Sitting Bull. And actually, as he got older, he started talking about him. And that's actually what saved him. It actually brought him out of the alcoholism. It brought him out of all the things that he had pride in his story all of a sudden, right? Even though he was told not to talk about it. And so he had been publicizing and talking about Sitting Bull. And the University of Cambridge scientists said, hey, we got a hunch. Maybe we can use this lock of hair of Sitting Bull. And they had to get permission because by then Smithsonian had given permission to this grandson. And they got permission from the grandson to use this lock of hair in their studies. And And the first thing they did, this is a picture of Sitting Bull up here at the top. And down at the bottom is his great-grandson, Ernestine LaPointe. And can you see, it's a black and white picture from 2018, I think. That's the one on the bottom. That's his son. Can you see the resemblance? It's starking. It's starking. So how were they able to do it? Basically, what they did is with that lock of hair, normally with ancient DNA, we use, there are 4 types of DNA. Let me go backwards a little bit. The first type of DNA that ancient DNA usually uses is mitochondrial DNA. It's a DNA that's found in every cell. Most people know mitochondria is what? The energy of the cell. And it's loaded with its own type of DNA. And that DNA, its ancestry evolved from bacteria. And it's passed on from the female to every one of her offsprings. So that's what we use for ancient DNA, because you can get a lot of it, a whole lot of it. And so with ancient DNA, a lot of the DNA degrades over periods of time, so you need a lot of DNA. That type of technique, as I was telling you earlier, costs a lot of money. It's not reasonable to do that type of DNA study. I've actually worked in a lab with ancient DNA, and nobody else works in that lab. You wear gloves. It's very, 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 very different than any other lab, and that's what costs so much. The other type of DNA is Y-DNA. Have any of y'all done Y-DNA? This is going to link you back to your fathers, men. It's the men line. It's passed along very faithfully. These other 3 DNA are found in the nucleus of the cell, and that's where you're used to finding it. So you have 23 pair of chromosomes as a human, and the sex chromosome is the last one. If you're a boy, you have an X and a Y, and that's that Y chromosome that we look for men. We don't use that one too often except for to look just for men. The other one is autosomal DNA. It's the rest of the DNA in the nucleus. And that's what they use, that technique with the autosomal DNA, the other 22 chromosomes. And luckily, it was enough of that DNA left intact in that lock of hair for them to actually not only get the DNA, but they compared it to Ernest as well as other living relatives, his siblings. He has 3 other siblings, and they all tied back to this lock of hair. And so that's where technology is going. I'm excited about it. I've been preaching about it for a long time, waiting for them to be able to do this. And so these University of Cambridge scientists published this in Science Advances is the name of the magazine. And what they did was use the non-traditional DNA, which is the autosomal DNA, to look at an old piece of DNA to extract the old DNA out of the hair follicles. And they compared it with Sitting Bulls and Aaron Pont. Now, what is he going to do with this? That's the story that I was just telling you about the different types of DNA there are. That's the chromosomes that are laid out there. The sex chromosomes, X and Y at the end, are the ones that I was talking about with the Y DNA. And then the autosomal are all of the 22 other DNA chromosomes that are found in the nucleus. And then you have your mitochondrial, which is shown in red. That one is your maternal DNA that's passed on from mother to every one of her children. But what was he going to do with this? The future implications of it for us opens possibilities of extracting DNA from those samples, and not just our hair, but our teeth and our bones, opening up and graves and looking at those graves and proving whether or not this person is really who they are. That's what Aaron's next step is. Ernest's next step is. It's another family rumor. When Sitting Bull died, Sitting Bull was thrown into a grave right there on the reservation. And Ernest, the great-grandson, was there years later when they moved his body in I gotta look and see when it was, but he was there as a boy when they moved his bones to supposedly South Dakota. South Dakota made it as a tourist attraction and said, hey, we'll put this huge monument over your grandfather's bones, and that way it'll always be a memorial to it, because when he died, there was so much anger with Sitting Bull for killing George Custer that they gave him it was illegal to do any of the Indian customs. They weren't allowed to sing. They weren't allowed to do any of their ceremonies. So they just dumped him in a grave like we would do nowadays, but that was appalling to their culture. And so South Dakota is where he was buried, but they moved him to North Dakota. And North Dakota promised to honor him with this monument, a huge monument. They encased him in a steel tomb on top of concrete. And so Ernest, the great-grandson, said, that's where my father is. He thinks his grandfather is still in South Dakota. Then there's another story on top of that. A few days after Sitting Bull was killed, because of the desecration of the body and not being allowed to do their normal rituals, they believe that the Lakota Sioux tribe and his relatives actually went back to Canada and took his bones back to Canada and buried him on top of a mountain called the Turtle Mountain. So it's 3 different places that have claimed Sitting Bull's remains. And that's the next step that Ernest wants to do, is to prove where his relatives' bones actually are, where his ancestors' bones are actually located. That story with the turtle actually has more documentary behind it. With that big of a group and they're going across the line, they actually have record of them crossing into Canada, and the police there in Canada sending out their, I think it's called their Canadian Mounties, and going up to this large group of Indians because they thought they were there for unpeaceful reasons, and it turned out they were there for peaceful reasons. All of that's documented, and it was only 2 weeks after they buried him. So it really is going to be very crucial in the next step for Ernest LaPont, is proving where were those bones actually buried. And the other thing I didn't tell you is where Sitting Bull was actually buried, they buried a number of people there. It was a mass grave. So did they actually get his bones? And that's the question. So that's where we're going. The next thing, an article just came out 2 weeks ago, and it's hot off the trail. This is the largest family tree now. It is tracing modern humans. They took 27, they took DNA from not just living people, but they took those ancient bones, ancient human DNA as well, and they formed the largest tree. And it all goes back to Sudan. And this was done by the University of Oxford at the Big Data Institute. And it's published in a well-known journal in Science magazine. And what I want to encourage you to do is to look at and this is the hyperlink here, look at the actual video of their data. Their data tracks humans that they collected DNA from and their locations on the maps where they're located, both humans that are living as well as ancient bones where they were located. And it all, you'll see when you push the video, it all comes back to this small little place north of modern-day Sudan, right beside the Nile. And so from this, they were able to build the largest tree from 27 million people, both living and dead. And they are pushing this project even more. So I would watch and see where this goes as well. All of these technologies are helping us to answer questions and mysteries and get past that rumor of we don't talk about Bruno. That is a big issue in the room with genealogists, is this DNA helps to push past those stories and get to the facts of everything. And that was what I wanted to share with you all, what's hot off the press from 2021 and 2022, what technologies you can look forward to having at your disposal in the coming years. Yes?
I was just wondering, how far back does that actually go?
That goes back about, I think it goes back 1 million years ago. Yeah. Yeah, when you look on the video, it's actually going back in time, and I think it is 1 million years ago. Yeah, it's pushing back even farther than what we traditionally think of. Good question. Any other questions? I encourage you to get past those mysteries. Make them fact. Use the DNA to find out what's really happening. Go find that lock of hair in your Bible or in somebody else's Bible that's related to you. Get it prepared and get it ready. Don't touch it. That's why I was like, when she gave it to me, try not to touch it. You want their DNA, not yours, in there. And keep it in some type of bag, Ziploc bag, and be ready. It's coming. I don't know when it's coming, but guess what? Ancestry and companies like that, they have a ton of money. That research is out there in a magazine, just like I saw it as a scientist. They're going to figure out how to do it on a mass scale so that everybody can use it. And it's going to be exciting times. Thank you. Next is Marilee.
Switch computers. I'm Marilee Gardner. My story is Kurt, my husband, is a live one. If anybody was here 2 years ago, you heard my story. I am adopted, so we can get this up. I'm going to show you just a couple of slides. We've just got a few minutes, because we don't want to be the group that's late for lunch. All right. Okay, now I need to get it to right there. All right. This is from my son. This is my son's. So this is him. This right here, what you are looking at is straight out of Family Search. These are documented people. I know who those are. Those are my parents. Those are my in-laws. This is what I have on Family Search. It is not what you would find. Well, okay. If you were looking at my DNA, because I am adopted. Now, when I was going through trying to find who my biological family was, there was a group called ALMA, Adoptive Liberation Movement Association, and they are the one that helped me, and there was a whole lot of snooping on the internet. When I started that, it was even before the internet. But now there's a lot that can happen. This is one, this would be, he is my biological father. Now that was interesting to find out because, let me go to the next slide. I'll tell you what, is this the one I want? This would be my birth mother. Let me go to, I think this is the one I want. No, this is not. Okay, I don't have that one, but if you look at him, what you don't see is he had a brother named George. Both served in the military in Sacramento right at the time. So when I was first doing this, and first of all, I didn't do it to find that out. My son had given it to me as a gift. Man, what the heck? And I didn't know my nationality, so that was my reason for doing the DNA test. So that was it. Then when it had been about 2 years, a younger girl contacted me. She said, "How are we related?" I said, "Oh, I don't know," because I don't want to really be the one that blabs a secret. And I had at one point spoke one time only to my birth mother, who was terrified and begged me never to say anything, and I wouldn't. So she contacted me, and as soon as she said her mother was a Wood, I knew exactly where we were going to go with this, that it wasn't my birth mother's. So her mother called me, and her mom said, "You know, my cousin Jessica knows her father, who is George Francis, and we had John Francis, and everybody's in the Air Force." It was a little confusing. She knows, and he admitted he's fathered other children. So then that Jessica called me. And Jessica said, "You know, we really don't know because of the timeline in Sacramento, 2 different bases, Mather and Travis. But let me take the test. You're either going to come back as a cousin or a half-sister." But guess what happened before that DNA test came? John's daughter, Beth, did a DNA test, and it is him. So she could tell through Ancestry, I keep my stuff private, that her daughter had contacted me. So she's on the phone with her cousin, but then the cousin's texting me, "What do I do? What do I do? What do I do?" And I said, "At this point, you're going to have to tell them the truth." So I have a great relationship with them. Well, the older one is very friendly. The younger one always keeps in touch with me. He has since passed. I never met him, but his wife is still alive. And when I went up to South Carolina, they live in Maine. The mom and the younger one had come to South Carolina. My husband and I actually went up and met them. Yeah, her name is Pat. And so we went to South Carolina and met them. And Pat came right up to me. "You must be Marilee," and hugged me. She brought me documentation and pictures and things like that. Does it matter? Yes, it was very good to get the medical history. It's very fun for me to keep in touch with Stacy. She has a couple daughters, so we can compare some family history. But for me, if you were going to look at what I follow and what I research heavily the Balch line. That is my father. That is, so, you know, this is the point of this, it really depends. My parents legally adopted me. My parents raised me. Those are my parents. Yes, I have a biological father, and that's great. I heard he was a nice guy. Would have loved to have met him. The fact remains, I am the daughter of Lee Balch. That's not going to change just because my DNA did. So that was my point in showing it to you today. There's different ways, but I really want a moment alone with Jennifer because I know it won't be this one. It's going to be this one. No, this one. I know a lot about both birth sides. Not that I've had no contact with any of my birth mom's family. They show up, but they haven't messaged me, and I am not going to be the one to start it. But then this one came up a couple of months ago, and I can't wait for Jennifer to help me find out. I don't know. But this one right here, I don't know any of these names. They do not. I know, but I don't know where they fit in with my birth mother or father. DNA-wise, couldn't tell you how these people are fitting in. So I don't know. Mine is a case of I don't know, but now I'm going to be, Jennifer and I are good friends anyway, so I'm excited to find out. And I just wanted to show you, you've got your legal family. And what happens if your DNA family is different? Or what happens if your cousin's not really your biological cousin? What happens if you have another aunt? I can answer that question. It happened a long time ago. You are who you are. So is your DNA, is it learned? Are you born with it? I would have to say from somebody who can answer that, it's both. It's both. But it's still up to you to make your life. And my biggest point I want to make, my friend Gina is here. She's had an experience in her family where the people said, "Oh, DNA lies," and they won't admit it. It's like this horrible thing that happened. But if I could say anything to any of you, be kind. We don't know what they were going through. I don't know what happened to my birth mother, but she was horrified and scared out of her mind the one time I called her. That's not for me to judge, and it doesn't matter because I'm still who I am. So when you get these surprises, it's nice, and you go to people like Jennifer, but still, you are who you are. All right, I think we're up for time. Oh, do you have a question? Any questions?
Correction for you. It's made in McClellan. Travis is from the south.
Right, but I was born in the southern part of Sacramento. Oh, I'm from North Highlands.
Okay, well,
yeah.
That's where I live.
McClellan, yeah. Oh, you're kidding. You lived in North. I went to Highlands High School. Ah, well, aren't you? We got to talk. All right, guys, I will see you at lunch. Thank you. Jennifer, I've got to go down there to help with lunch. Then I think we need to talk. All three of us need to talk, okay?